What if I told you one of the world's most famous nuts isn't actually a nut? Another spends months building pressure just to crack itself open. One can't reproduce without the help of a rainforest rodent. And another once contained compounds capable of releasing poison. Sounds like the beginning of a fantasy story. It's actually your snack bowl. For something so small, nuts have had an astonishing impact on human history. They crossed deserts with merchants, sailed across oceans with explorers, fed families through long winters, and quietly became some of the most successful survival packages evolution has ever designed. Because that's what they really are. Not snacks, not ingredients, but carefully engineered life support systems. Inside every shell is everything a future tree needs to survive its first days of life. Enough stored energy, enough nutrients, a complete genetic blueprint, all waiting for the perfect moment to begin again. Today we're following that story. From ancient trade routes and royal gardens to modern orchards and the heart of the Amazon rainforest. And somewhere along the way, you may discover that the smallest foods on your table have some of the biggest stories in nature. Walk into almost any supermarket and you'll find them together. Mixed nuts, roasted nuts, salted nuts, as if they're all members of the same family. But that's one of the biggest misconceptions in food. Some of these are true botanical nuts, others are seeds hidden inside fruits. One belongs to the legume family, alongside beans and peas. Yet because they look similar, taste similar, and often end up in the same recipes, we've spent centuries calling them all by the same name. Nature, however, tells a far more interesting story. Every one of these species has solved the same problem in its own way. How do you protect the next generation? Some built incredibly hard shells. Others formed partnerships with birds, insects, or mammals. Some invested in rich stores of oils and nutrients. Others evolved clever ways to spread their seeds across entire landscapes. The result isn't just a collection of snacks, it's millions of years of evolutionary engineering. And every shell you're about to see tells a completely different story. Every spring, California performs one of nature's most spectacular disappearing acts. For a few brief weeks, dry valleys transform into what looks like an endless blanket of white and pale pink. More than 1 million acres of almond trees bloom almost simultaneously, creating one of the largest flowering events on Earth. Then come the bees. Not thousands, millions. Commercial beekeepers transport honeybee colonies from across the United States to pollinate the orchards during this short flowering window. Miss that opportunity, and the year's harvest can be dramatically reduced. It's a remarkable partnership. Tiny insects supporting a global crop worth billions of dollars. Today, California has historically produced around 80% of the world's almonds, making it one of the most important agricultural regions for this single food. But here's the surprise. Despite their name, almonds aren't true botanical nuts. They're the seeds of a stone fruit, making them close relatives of peaches, plums, and cherries. If you've ever seen an almond before it fully ripens, the resemblance is obvious. The seed sits inside a soft green fruit that looks remarkably similar to a young peach. The juicy flesh simply dries out instead of becoming sweet. Thousands of years ago, people living across Central Asia and the Middle East began selecting almond trees that produced sweeter seeds. Without realizing it, they were changing the future of agriculture. Wild almonds naturally contain compounds capable of releasing hydrogen cyanide when the seed is damaged. Many are intensely bitter, and consuming large amounts can be dangerous. Over countless generations, farmers repeatedly planted seeds from trees, producing milder almonds. Slowly, the sweeter varieties replaced the bitter ones. Every almond you eat today is the result of thousands of years of patient human selection. One small decision, made again and again, until an ancient survival seed became one of the world's favorite foods. At first glance, the walnut almost looks designed. 2 rounded halves, deep folds, an uncanny resemblance to the human brain. People noticed that resemblance thousands of years ago. Long before microscopes or neuroscience existed, many believed nature left hidden clues inside its creations. If a plant resembled part of the body, perhaps it was meant to help that part of the body. Today we know that's not how biology works. But history produced an interesting coincidence. Walnuts are naturally rich in omega-3 fatty acids, along with nutrients such as copper and manganese, making them a nutritious part of a balanced diet. Not because they resemble a brain, simply because evolution shaped them that way. Sometimes nature creates coincidences that last for centuries. Archaeological evidence shows walnuts were cultivated across parts of Central Asia and ancient Persia, long before spreading into Europe through expanding trade networks. For merchants, walnuts solved a practical problem. Fresh fruit spoiled quickly. Walnuts didn't. Their thick shell protected the seed from moisture, insects, and physical damage, allowing it to survive long journeys that would destroy softer foods. In many ways, the shell was the original travel case. But perhaps the walnut's greatest achievement isn't surviving the journey. It's surviving the future. Inside that shell is enough stored energy to keep a young seedling alive until its first leaves unfold and begin producing energy from sunlight. Everything the future tree needs for its first chapter fits inside the palm of your hand. Now for the biggest surprise in the entire video. The peanut isn't a nut. Botanically, it's a legume, making it a closer relative of beans, peas, and lentils than almonds or walnuts. But its unusual family tree isn't the strangest thing about it. Its growing strategy is. Most plants proudly display their harvest above the ground. Peanuts hide theirs. After small yellow flowers are pollinated, a slender structure called a peg begins to grow downward. Instead of reaching for sunlight, it buries itself in the soil. Only then does the peanut pod begin to develop underground. It's one of the most unusual reproductive strategies among major food crops. Peanuts were first domesticated in South America thousands of years ago, before spreading across the globe through trade and agriculture. They succeeded for simple reasons. They were nutritious, easy to grow, easy to transport, easy to store. During the early 20th century, agricultural scientist George Washington Carver encouraged farmers to include peanuts in crop rotation systems. Because peanuts work with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil, rotating them with crops like cotton helped improve soil fertility while reducing nutrient depletion. Today, peanuts appear almost everywhere. Peanut butter, sauté sauce, chocolate bars, breakfast cereals, cooking oil, protein bars. Yet for millions of people, they're also one of the world's major food allergens, meaning even tiny amounts can trigger severe allergic reactions in sensitive individuals. One crop, two completely different realities, and by now, something should feel strange. The almond isn't a true nut. The peanut isn't one either. So what actually makes a nut a nut? Imagine spending an entire summer growing, just to make one tiny sound. Pop. That sound tells a pistachio farmer everything. The nut is ready. Unlike walnuts or hazelnuts, pistachios don't usually wait for an animal or a person to force them open. They do it themselves. As the kernel inside matures, it slowly expands. Pressure builds for weeks. Eventually, the shell can no longer contain it. It splits apart naturally while the fruit is still on the tree. It's one of nature's simplest signals. No timer, no calendar. Just perfect timing. People have cultivated pistachios for thousands of years, across parts of the Middle East. From there, traders carried them along ancient trade routes into the Mediterranean and beyond, where their long shelf life made them ideal companions for long journeys. Fresh fruit spoiled quickly. Pistachios didn't. Break one open and another mystery appears. Why are they green? The answer lies in chlorophyll, the same pigment that gives leaves their color. Pistachios also contain naturally occurring purple pigments called anthocyanins, creating one of the most distinctive color combinations in the food world. Nature didn't color them for us. It simply never erased the paint. Close your eyes and imagine the smell of a hazelnut. Warm, sweet, rich, comforting. Now here's the surprise. Fresh hazelnuts don't smell like that. Straight from the tree, they're mild, delicate, and only slightly nutty. The flavor we recognize around the world doesn't exist yet. Fire creates it. As hazelnuts roast, hundreds of new aroma compounds develop through the Maillard reaction, the same chemical process that transforms bread into toast, coffee beans into coffee, and a steak into something irresistibly aromatic. Within minutes, the entire personality of the nut changes. That's why roasted hazelnuts became the foundation of chocolates, pralines, pastries, and spreads spread across the globe. Today, Turkey produces the majority of the world's hazelnuts, thanks to the ideal climate along the Black Sea coast. But long before people planted orchards, someone else was planting forests. Every autumn, squirrels bury hundreds of hazelnuts to prepare for winter. Many are recovered, some aren't. Those forgotten seeds quietly germinate when the weather warms. A missed meal, a new tree. Sometimes an entire forest begins with a bad memory. Some foods become valuable because they're fashionable. Macadamias became valuable because nature made them difficult. These trees are native to the rainforests of eastern Australia, where indigenous Australians harvested the nuts for generations before commercial cultivation began. Growing a macadamia orchard demands patience. A young tree may begin producing small crops after about 5 years, but reaching full production can take 12 to 15 years. That's a long investment for a single harvest. Then comes the next challenge: the shell. Macadamia shells are among the hardest of any commercially eaten nut. For decades, cracking them efficiently without damaging the delicate kernel inside required specialized engineering. Only after all that effort do you reach the reward: smooth, creamy, rich, almost buttery. It's easy to understand why macadamias became synonymous with premium desserts and luxury chocolates. Sometimes the rarest foods aren't expensive because people decided they should be. They're expensive because nature made them slow. If almonds teach us about agriculture, pecans teach us about patience. Long before European settlers arrived in North America, indigenous peoples gathered pecans each autumn from enormous native trees, growing along rivers and floodplains. Unlike annual crops, pecan trees simply kept giving, season after season, year after year. Some continue producing nuts for well over a century. Imagine planting a tree today, knowing your great-grandchildren might still harvest from its branches. Very few foods create a connection like that. Their naturally sweet, buttery flavor eventually made pecans the centerpiece of one of North America's most famous desserts, pecan pie. But perhaps the dessert isn't the real story. The tree is. Because pecans remind us that nature isn't interested in deadlines. Its greatest achievements are measured, not in years, but in generations. Everything you've seen so far depends on a tree. The Brazil nut depends on an entire rainforest. Its story begins high above the forest floor. Brazil nut trees can grow more than 50 meters tall, rising above much of the surrounding canopy and living for centuries. Their fruits are extraordinary, woody, heavy, roughly the size of a coconut. Inside each one are the seeds we know as Brazil nuts. But here's the challenge: the fruit is so tough that very few animals can open it. One of the most important is the agouti, a rainforest rodent with exceptionally strong teeth. It gnaws through the fruit, eats some of the seeds, and buries others for later. Some are forgotten. Those forgotten seeds become tomorrow's forest. The story doesn't end there. Brazil nut flowers have a complex structure that can be effectively pollinated only by certain large native bees. Without those bees, very few fruits develop. Without agoutis, very few seeds are dispersed. That's why most Brazil nuts sold around the world are still harvested from wild forests rather than plantations. Every Brazil nut is the product of countless interactions between trees, insects, animals, and an intact rainforest. Remove one piece, and the whole system begins to struggle. By now, these don't feel like ordinary snacks anymore. Because every shell you've seen was never built for us. It was built for survival, to protect life, to store energy, to wait patiently until the conditions were right for another beginning. For thousands of years, people carried nuts across continents because they lasted when almost everything else spoiled. Nature had a different reason. It wasn't trying to feed civilizations. It was trying to grow forests. Inside every almond, every walnut, every pistachio, every pecan is the same extraordinary promise. Given enough sunlight, enough rain, enough time, something small can become something enormous. A tree that shades future generations, feeds wildlife, produces thousands of new seeds, and quietly continues a story that began millions of years ago. Maybe that's why nature hides so much potential inside something so small. Because sometimes the beginning of an entire forest fits in the palm of your hand.